Have you ever opened up to someone only to feel something shift in the silence that followed, like you handed them a piece of yourself, and suddenly, though nothing was said, you knew you'd given away too much? That quiet unease, that inner voice whispering, "I shouldn't have shared that." We've all been there. In moments of trust, of loneliness, of hope, we reveal more than we should. Not because we're naive, but because we crave understanding. And yet, the older we get, the more we realize this simple truth. Not everything sacred needs to be spoken aloud. The Stoics knew this long before the digital age. In a world where everything is documented, posted, and broadcasted, they remind us of something radical. Privacy is power, not secrecy, not paranoia, but quiet, deliberate ownership of your life, because once something leaves your lips, it no longer belongs solely to you. It becomes vulnerable, subject to interpretation, judgment, or even betrayal. So what should remain yours alone? What parts of your story, your plans, your struggles are better protected than exposed? This video isn't here to tell you how to live. It's simply a gentle invitation to reflect. To consider that maybe in a noisy world, the wisest thing you can do is keep certain truths close to your chest. If that idea speaks to you, stay with me. You might just find that silence, intentional, calm and powerful, isn't emptiness at all. It's freedom. Number 1. Age is not your identity. Have you ever looked into the mirror and felt the world silently assigning meaning to your reflection? Not the lines on your face, but what those lines supposedly represent: limitations, expectations, expiration dates. In a society obsessed with youth, age becomes more than just a fact. It becomes a forecast. But what if that number people ask for so casually is not a measure of worth, but a weight placed upon your back? The Stoics warned us about illusions of control, of permanence, of time. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Yet we let age, something we have no command over, dictate how we are seen, how we are treated, and how we treat ourselves." As if turning 40 or 60 or 70 somehow changes the fire inside, as if the soul submits to a calendar. Consider this. A man once walked into a room full of executives, all half his age. He spoke with conviction, offered insights drawn from decades of failure and triumph, but as soon as he mentioned he was 72, the room changed. Their tone softened, their feedback turned into advice. Subtly, they stopped listening as equals, not because he was wrong, but because the number had done the speaking. That man, though calm, felt a familiar ache, not from age, but from being prematurely dismissed. This is why some warriors choose to keep their age private, not out of vanity, but out of strategy. Not because they fear the truth, but because they understand the power of perception. Age, once known, becomes a frame through which others view you. It triggers assumptions. You're too old to start that. You must be ready to slow down. You probably don't get it. And so, without meaning harm, people begin to box you in. Seneca cautioned, "We are always complaining that our days are few and acting as though there would be no end of them." The irony is that the more we talk about age, the more we distort time. We worry about having too little when we have not even begun to use what we have. Age breeds fear only when we treat it as a limit instead of a teacher. But the true warrior walks with the weight of time on his back, not as a burden, but as a compass. He does not count years. He counts courage, clarity, and contribution. There's something quietly powerful about a man or woman who lets their work speak louder than their number, who chooses to be known for their presence, not their timeline, who refuses to be reduced to digits. That's not secrecy. That's sovereignty. When you don't volunteer your age, you're not hiding. You're choosing the right way to be seen, for your wisdom, your strength, your purpose, not for someone else's idea of where you should be. In the end, it's not how old you are that matters, it's how fully you show up to the day you've been given. That's the kind of presence no number can define. That's the kind of soul that outlives time. So ask yourself, are you living by the number or by the moment? Because what comes next isn't determined by how long you've lived, but by how deeply you choose to live now. And the next thing to protect just as fiercely is your struggles, those sacred battles that shaped you but aren't meant for everyone to see. Let's move forward. Number 2, keep your wealth to yourself. Have you ever noticed how quickly the air shifts when the topic of money enters a room? Conversations become measured, smiles stiffen, eyes flicker with comparison or curiosity. Whether you have too much or too little, once people know your financial standing, they often stop seeing you clearly. And in that moment, something subtle but powerful is lost: your freedom. The Stoics understood this tension long before modern society equated worth with wealth. Epictetus once said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." And yet, in today's world, money is not just currency, it's identity, it's status. It's the measuring stick by which people are too often judged or misjudged. That's precisely why the wise warrior guards their financial life with quiet strength, not from fear, but from wisdom. Think about it. If the world believes you're wealthy, expectations start to grow. Friends ask for favors they would never dare request from someone else. Relatives call not just to connect, but to calculate. Even acts of kindness get twisted into obligations. You become less of a person, more of a solution. And when generosity is expected, it loses its soul. A gift without freedom is not a gift at all. It's a transaction in disguise. On the other hand, if you openly share your financial struggles, the ground tilts in a different direction. People begin to pity you, advise you, question your past, your discipline, your choices. They might not say it aloud, but it shows in the lowered tone, the softened gaze, the shift in respect. In a world obsessed with success stories, few know how to hold space for silent perseverance. But as Seneca wrote, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. True poverty has nothing to do with numbers. It lives in the mind that's always hungry, always reaching, never still. I remember hearing about a woman named Lydia, quiet, humble, kind. She ran a modest bookshop and lived in a small apartment. No one knew that she had once been a corporate executive with investments that could last a lifetime. She had chosen simplicity, not from scarcity, but from clarity. When asked about her lifestyle, she'd smile and say, "I have what I need." People respected her presence, not her portfolio. She understood what many forget. When you stay silent about your wealth, you give people the chance to know your heart instead of your balance sheet. Financial privacy is not about secrecy. It's about control over how others relate to you and how you relate to yourself. The less others know, the less they expect, the less they project. And in that space of quiet autonomy, you find something rare: the ability to act without pressure, to give without obligation, and to live without having to justify your path. The warrior doesn't flaunt his armor. He keeps it polished in silence, worn only when needed. In the same way, your wealth, whether great or growing, should whisper, not shout. Let your life reflect your values, not your valuables. Let generosity be a surprise, not a demand. Let contentment speak louder than any display. Because the right way to handle money is not to make it a centerpiece, but a quiet tool, held firmly, used wisely, and spoken of rarely. And now, from what we hold in our bank accounts, we turn to something even more sacred, our relationships. Specifically the ones that are still in progress, still delicate. Let's explore why some love stories, especially in their early chapters, are best kept away from the public eye. Number 3. Family struggles. Stay inside. Have you ever sat at a family table, surrounded by people who share your name, your blood, your past, and still felt like there were stories that no one dared to tell? Glances exchanged in silence, histories carefully edited, memories softened or sharpened, depending on who was listening. Every family has its truths and its shadows, but not all of them are meant for the outside world. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." Nowhere is that discipline more vital than within the walls of our own home. Family is where we learn to love, to argue, to forgive, and often to fail. These are not polished chapters written for public reading. They are private pages, weathered and unfinished, and there is dignity in keeping them so. The Stoics remind us that we cannot control the judgment of others, only our own response to pain, misunderstanding, and imperfection. Epictetus put it simply, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. But in a culture of oversharing, people often speak too soon, too much, and to the wrong audience. They expose family struggles to friends, to co-workers, to the digital crowd, forgetting that those listeners were never part of the story to begin with. They can only see fragments, and from those fragments, they draw conclusions. Conclusions that wound deeper than the original hurt. Imagine this. A man once confided in a colleague about a rift with his brother, years of tension, silence, and a failed inheritance dispute. He needed to vent, to feel heard. But within weeks, the story had spread, retold, reshaped, stripped of nuance. By the time it circled back to his family, it was no longer a confession, it was a betrayal. The damage wasn't just in the facts that were shared, but in the trust that was lost. This is why the warrior chooses silence, not because he fears conflict, but because he respects the sacred. To speak of family pain lightly or in the wrong space is to open old wounds with careless hands. Some truths must be addressed, yes, but the right way is inward, not outward. Through conversations held in kitchens, in long drives, in private moments where honesty has a chance to heal instead of harm. Protecting family secrets does not mean denying the need for resolution. It means creating space where resolution is still possible, where the people involved have room to speak, to be misunderstood, to try again. When outsiders enter that space too soon, they bring their own projections, their own judgments, and the chance for healing slips further away. I once heard of a woman named Teresa who carried the weight of a long-standing conflict between her 2 sons. When asked by friends about the tension, she never gave details. Not because she was ashamed, but because she was loyal. "This is a storm my boys must weather," she said, "but I will not invite others to watch them struggle." Years later, when reconciliation came, it was fragile, but real, and untouched by the noise of strangers. There's a reason the word sanctuary implies silence. The home is not perfect, it is not peaceful every day, but it is sacred, and that sanctity deserves to be guarded even when things fall apart, especially when they do. So speak carefully, speak compassionately, and sometimes choose not to speak at all. Because to honor your family is not to reveal its flaws, it's to preserve its hope. The warrior who walks this path of restraint does not walk it in fear, but in faith, in the possibility of restoration. And from the quiet halls of family, we now move into another delicate realm, the earliest stages of love. Let's talk about why the beginnings of a romantic relationship are best kept behind closed doors, where they can grow roots before facing the wind. Number 4, your health is yours alone. Have you ever hesitated before answering the question, how are you feeling these days? Not because you're hiding the truth, but because the truth is complicated. One prescription here, a follow-up appointment there, a pill to lower this, a routine to strengthen that. It becomes a quiet rhythm in your life, one that most don't see, and perhaps shouldn't. Because when others start to define you by your prescriptions, they forget to see the person behind them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Our health, no matter how carefully we guard it, eventually becomes something we manage rather than control. And that's not weakness, that's life. But while illness may enter the body, it should never take over our identity. That's why, for the warrior who walks with grace through aging, one of the strongest choices is to protect the privacy of their health. When you reveal the details of your medical conditions or medications, something shifts in how others treat you. Conversations that once centered on your ideas, your character, your presence, now start orbiting around your body, your symptoms, your limitations. You're no longer the one who built a life of experience. You become the one who's managing something, and while their concern may be genuine, their perception narrows. They see your current challenge, but not your enduring strength. There's a man named Daniel who comes to mind. In his early 60s, he was sharp, generous, and deeply respected in his community. But after casually mentioning his blood pressure medication during a conversation, he noticed a shift. Friends began offering unsolicited health tips, recommending herbal cures, and treating him as fragile. You should rest more. Maybe skip the hiking trip. Their care was well-intentioned, but it left Daniel feeling unseen. He hadn't changed. Only their perception had. That's the problem with oversharing. It opens the door not just to compassion, but to projection. Suddenly, everyone becomes a doctor. Everyone has advice. Everyone wants to fix something they don't fully understand. And in the process, your dignity is slowly chipped away. Not by malice, but by misplaced attention. Seneca once said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." Carrying illness with quiet strength requires far more bravery than most people will ever recognize. So let that courage be yours. Protect your health not just through treatments, but through boundaries. Share what is necessary with your doctors. Confide in those who have earned your trust. But beyond that, let silence be your ally. Because the right way to manage your health is not through public declarations, but through private resilience. Remember, your health is not your whole story. You are still the sum of your thoughts, your values, your purpose. Illness may shape your days, but it does not define your soul. And when others don't know the full picture, they're more likely to see you, not as a diagnosis, but as a whole human being, walking through life with discipline and quiet fire. So be selective. Speak when it serves your healing. Stay silent when it protects your peace. Because the warrior who endures with grace does not need to explain every battle. He simply keeps walking. If you've ever chosen silence to protect your strength, drop the words "inner resilience" in the comments. And if this message speaks to you, consider subscribing for more reflections like this, where we value depth, not noise. Now, from matters of the body, we move towards something even more vulnerable: the early sparks of love. Let's explore why protecting a new relationship from public eyes might be the wisest way to let it grow. Number 5. Love grows best in silence. Have you ever watched two people in love share a glance that needed no words, just a quiet knowing? A moment where the world fades and something deeper, older, more enduring passes between them. That kind of intimacy is rare, and in a world obsessed with exposure, it becomes even more precious. Sexuality, especially in later years, is often misunderstood. Some assume it fades with time, others mock it or worse, turn it into a spectacle. But the truth is far simpler and far richer. Intimacy doesn't vanish, it transforms. With age comes a deeper kind of connection, one rooted not in novelty, but in trust, not in performance, but in presence. And the more meaningful it becomes, the more it demands protection. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. When your private life is invaded by the noise of public opinion, your peace begins to fracture." The most sacred parts of your being, your desires, your vulnerability, your capacity to love, should never be subject to gossip or performance. They are not headlines. They are not entertainment. They are sacred ground. There's a couple I once knew, Jonas and Mireille. In their late 60s, they walked hand in hand like newlyweds. There was a warmth between them that drew people in. But what kept their bond strong wasn't what they shared with the world. It was what they chose to keep only for each other. They never spoke of their private life, never invited commentary or applause, and in that privacy they had freedom. Not the freedom to hide, but the freedom to be real without the pressure of performance. The Stoics would have honored that. Seneca reminds us, "Enjoy present pleasures in such a way as not to injure future ones." When we talk too openly about our romantic lives, we risk diluting them. Intimacy thrives in trust. And trust is built in silence, in subtle gestures, in moments that belong to no one but the two who share them. When others intrude, through questions, assumptions, or commentary, the energy shifts. What was sacred becomes social currency. What was private becomes public property. As we grow older, our needs change, but our right to dignity remains constant. The warrior understands this. He knows that not everything must be defended out loud. Some things are guarded simply by not inviting the world in. There is power in that restraint. There is wisdom in silence. Choosing to keep your intimate life private is not about shame. It is about respect. Respect for yourself, for your partner, for the space you've built together. It's about refusing to let the world reduce your joy to a punchline or your tenderness to rumor. You don't owe anyone your story. You owe it only to those who have earned the right to be part of it. And so, protect what is sacred. Speak carefully, if at all. Not because you fear being misunderstood, but because you understand its value. Let your love grow not in the spotlight, but in the warmth of its own truth. From here, we turn to another kind of revelation, one that's often shared too quickly and regretted too late. Let's talk about why your long-term goals, your dreams for the future, deserve the same protection as your most private affections. Number 6. Give without needing applause. Have you ever seen someone do a good deed only to immediately turn and make sure others were watching? A hand given, but with a glance over the shoulder. A gift offered, but followed by a post online. In moments like these, something quietly sacred is lost. Because true charity isn't meant to be displayed, it's meant to be felt in the heart of the giver and the dignity of the receiver. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others. It is not to be lived by reference to others, but by following the inner light. And that light, when it burns steadily within, guides us towards service without show. The Stoics understood that virtue exists for its own sake, not to be paraded, not to be praised. When you give, the only question that matters is this: was it done from the right place, for the right reason? In a world that confuses applause with authenticity, it's easy to forget that quiet generosity is often the most powerful kind. A warrior knows this. He doesn't give to be seen. He gives because it's the right way to live, without expectation, without cameras, without making someone else's struggle a stage for his virtue. Take, for example, the story of Haruto, an elderly man who lived alone on the outskirts of a small town. Every winter, without fail, firewood would appear on the porches of families who couldn't afford heating. No one ever saw who brought it. No notes were left. No recognition was sought. It wasn't until Haruto passed away that his neighbor, a quiet woodworker, revealed the truth. Haruto had chopped and delivered those logs himself for over 20 winters. He never spoke of it. He never let it define him. But in that silence, he carried out a legacy of love far louder than words. Seneca warned, "A benefit is rendered worthless by the expectation of gratitude." When we give to be thanked, to be admired, or to be remembered, we distort the very act we claim to honor. Charity becomes performance. And performance, no matter how polished, cannot replace virtue. Real giving doesn't ask to be repaid. It doesn't keep score. It disappears as soon as it's done, leaving only impact behind. There's another side to this too, one we often overlook. Not everyone wants to be known as someone in need. When you give publicly, you may be taking something from the very person you're trying to help. Their dignity, their right to carry their burden quietly, their ability to accept without becoming a spectacle. The deepest kindness is the one that lifts someone up without announcing they had fallen. Discretion, then, is not just about modesty. It's about respect. It's about honoring the space between you and another soul, and it's about protecting the sacredness of a moment that belongs to neither pride nor pity. The Stoics remind us that virtue is inward. It's silent. It asks nothing, and when giving flows from that place, it purifies both the giver and the receiver. There's no need for credit, for validation, or for proof. The act is its own reward, so give when you can. Give generously, wisely, and above all, quietly. Let your charity move like a river underground, steady, unseen, and life-giving. Not because the world is watching, but because someone needed you, and you answered. From here, we turn to something that often feels too urgent to keep to ourselves, our long-term goals. But there's wisdom in holding those close too. Let's talk about why the future you're building should be protected until it's ready to stand on its own. Number 7, let honor speak quietly. Have you ever sat in a quiet room, away from the noise and attention, and asked yourself, what remains when no one is watching? Not the applause, not the titles, not the list of what you've achieved. What stays is your name, your presence, your reputation, not as others describe it, but as it silently echoes through the lives you've touched. Epictetus once said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And that reaction, repeated again and again over a lifetime, becomes your character. It forms the shape of your honor, not in grand gestures, but in the small, unseen decisions that define how you carry yourself. The Stoics knew that honor isn't something you post. It isn't something you demand. It is something you become. And yet, the temptation is strong. As we grow older and our stories grow longer, we want them to be remembered. We want others to know the sacrifices we made, the battles we fought, the victories we earned. But the more we speak of them, the more they risk becoming performance instead of proof. Honor, like a flame, needs air, but not too much. If we fan it constantly with our own pride, it begins to flicker. It burns out under the weight of self-importance. There's a story about a man named Elias, who once served as a decorated officer. He had medals, commendations, and the stories to match. But he never spoke of them. He ran a quiet coffee shop in a small town where the only thing he offered more generously than his coffee was his presence. He listened. He served. Only years later did a curious traveler stumble upon his name in an old newspaper, revealing the weight of his past. When asked why he never mentioned it, Elias smiled and said, "What matters most isn't what I've done, it's how I live now." Seneca warned us clearly, it is the mark of an unstable mind to seek admiration from others. When your identity is built on validation, it is always at risk, because the opinions of others are wind, they shift with the season. But the warrior doesn't build his life on praise, he builds it on principle. He understands that the right way to walk is not with a trumpet in hand, but with steadiness in every step. When you boast, you invite comparison, you provoke envy, you shift the dynamic from shared humanity to subtle competition. And in doing so, you lose something precious, the quiet respect that arises not from what is said, but from what is observed. The man who constantly reminds others of his greatness is often the one most afraid of being forgotten. Honor, when kept private, gains power. It becomes part of your posture, your presence. You walk into a room and people sense it, not because you said a word, but because of how you carry the silence. That's not mystery, that's mastery. So let your work speak. Let your consistency speak. Let the way you treat people speak. And say nothing unless it adds truth or grace. You are not your resume. You are not your followers. You are what remains when the world stops watching and the quiet still respects you. From here, we turn to one final form of silence, the kind that guards your future. Because even your goals, the dreams that keep you moving, deserve protection before they're ready to face the world. Let's talk about why some visions are better kept in the dark until they bloom. Number 8, release the weight of insults. Have you ever laid awake at night, replaying a moment that should have passed long ago? A sharp word, a mocking laugh, a conversation that ended in silence but echoed for years. We tell ourselves we've moved on, but the sting still lingers. Not on the skin, but deeper, beneath pride, beneath memory, beneath who we were when it happened. Epictetus once said, "If someone is able to provoke you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." That's a hard truth. We want to believe that the insult came from them, that the pain belongs to them. But the Stoics knew otherwise. It's not the words that harm us, it's the space we give them in our minds, the attention we pay, the power we hand over. You see, most people don't insult with strategy. They react from their own pain, their own limitations. And yet, we absorb their words as if they were carved in stone. We build narratives around them. We defend ourselves in imaginary arguments that no one else can hear. But the warrior does not carry another man's weakness on his back. He walks forward, deliberately, cleanly, not because he was never wounded, but because he chose not to bleed forever. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. The world will hurt you. People will misunderstand you. Some will belittle you without cause, but they cannot live inside your thoughts unless you invite them in. And once they're in, every time you repeat their insult, even in the privacy of your own head, you let them speak again. There's a man named Victor who comes to mind. In his youth he was mocked for his speech, a stutter that made him dread introductions, dread interviews, dread his own voice. One day, after a failed presentation, someone in the back of the room laughed and said, "Maybe this guy should stick to silence." The remark was careless. The room moved on, but Victor carried those 10 words for over a decade, long after the speaker had forgotten them. Years later, Victor had built a quiet life. He owned a bookstore, ran public readings, even mentored students in communication. But he never mentioned the insult, not to his friends, not to his wife. He had chosen something radical, not to share the pain, not to dwell in it, not to make it a part of his identity. He said once, "I didn't need anyone to validate that I had been hurt. I just needed to stop keeping the wound open." That's the right way. Not to suppress, not to pretend, but to refuse to let someone else's moment of weakness define the arc of your life. Forgiveness, in the Stoic sense, isn't about making peace with the offender. It's about reclaiming your peace from the offense. It's about letting go, not because they deserve it, but because you do. And sometimes, silence is the most powerful act of release. When you stop talking about who hurt you, when you stop collecting sympathy like armor, when you stop using the past to explain why you cannot be free in the present, that's when healing begins. Not loudly, but quietly, deeply, inwardly. We live in a culture where trauma is often a badge, where sharing our pain becomes a kind of performance. But the Stoic doesn't share their wounds for approval. They tend to them like a warrior, privately, patiently, without needing the world to understand. Because some burdens become heavier the more people touch them, so keep your old insults private, not because they weren't real, but because they no longer belong in the life you're building. They are fragments, not definitions. They are pages, not the whole book. In the end, letting go is not weakness. It is a form of strength that doesn't shout. It simply no longer flinches. And with that release, you open your hands to what truly matters. Not revenge, not validation, but peace. And now, having shed the weight of the past, we arrive at a final and sacred silence, the one that protects your purpose, your path, your future. Let's close by exploring why your deepest goals deserve protection, not promotion. As you continue forward, remember this: wisdom is not only in what we know, but in what we quietly carry. Not everything needs to be spoken. Some things gain power in silence. Privacy is not hiding, it is honoring what is sacred. When you choose to protect certain parts of your life, you're not withdrawing from the world. You are standing firm in what is yours. The Stoics taught us that true strength lies in restraint, that peace does not come from being understood by everyone, but from being rooted within yourself. By keeping these 8 parts of your life guarded, you are not losing connection. You are preserving clarity, dignity, and control. If this message resonated, leave a comment with quiet strength. It is a small act of intention, a reminder to yourself that you walk this path with purpose. And if you find value in these reflections, feel free to subscribe. Not for noise, but for a space where stillness is honored and thoughtfulness is nurtured. Your path does not end here. In the next video, we will go even deeper into the quiet practices that build unshakable character. Until then, carry your silence with pride and let it speak for you.